Everybody's in. Can we start? Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, I wanted to talk about access, but I think today I would talk about space, space in auditorium, and see how it works. Now, is it fine? Can we start? Very good. I'm very pleased to be with you. I'm Yves Daccord. I'm the Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Access is at the center of our work. It is at the center of our preoccupation, of our concern, of our relevance. And I'm very pleased to be able to discuss also access. And I'm very pleased also, and it was mentioned before, that the Congress focus on access. And I think my request, in a way, and my expectation would be that we don't keep only this notion of access at that level. The problem is, today we all speak about access. Everybody say it's access, yes or no. But we need to unpack the question of access. What is really at stake? You cannot say access is in danger like that. It's a very risky one. Because it's very easy for anybody to answer, no, but access is there. I mean, come on. I mean, humanitarian services, depend how you describe it, are delivered in Syria, I can prove you, including in difficult areas. They can say, no, it's delivered by the government. What are you telling me? All right? So we have to be very careful the way we are framing access. It's a critical issue, but we have to unpack it. And I hope this Congress will help us to do that. And my request also is not only towards us, it's also towards donors and governments and journalists. If we want to frame the reality, we have to control also how the reality is described. And it will not be a presidential statement of the Security Council which will change anything regarding access. I'm sorry to say that. What will change things over time is if we are able to influence the way people report about the work we do. And if we, humanitarian, are able to go one step further when we describe access. So, I will give you one perspective. It's only one. There's plenty of different perspectives when we talk about access. It's the perspective of my organization, and it could be challenged, but I will try to unpack, and I will try to see when, and this perspective, of course, is access to people affected by armed conflict, by what we call other situations of violence, and what does that mean? But I really would like to try to find 2 or 3 key elements which are really at danger. I was tasked and asked to focus my first hour on Henri Dunant, and then my next 2 hours on Syria and Afghanistan, and then I will finish tomorrow morning with a long discussions over access and all that. Now, I will be short. That was my point. So sorry about that in the sense that I won't be able to go into detail. So I will take some elements which I think are important. So when we talk about access, the first element, and I would like to take 3 key factors, and they could be 10, but let's say 3, which is today influencing, I would say, massively access wherever you are. And then I will zoom into more specific elements. The first one is we are living, and it's not new, but it's of course changing right now, through a massive change in the political landscape around the world. We know that. And one, among other, but one of the key developments is we don't see anymore international convergence, or let's say a strong international convergence to deal with conflict. This time is over. So what we see is, at best, the international community, through its global platform, being the Security Council or other, being able to contain, maybe, conflict. At best, not to deal with it. And this is a very strong reality. Syria has shown it. I think we can discuss. Libya maybe was the last one, was an exception with the Security Council resolution, which at the time, in a way, asked or brought back protection to civilians in the discussion. But that's the last one we will see over the next 10 years. And not only because of China and Russia, but also because of Brazil, because of a lot of big countries who feel that this international convergence is in fact a double agenda, which is unclear. It's about change of regime, not about humanitarian access. Think about that. So the first element is, and the absence, the lack of international convergence is something absolutely critical. We have to deal with it. Linked with that, and it's amazing to think about that, I would have been here with you 10 years ago, we would have spoken about the failure of state, about the fact that state as a political entity will fade away. Today, in this very unpredictable world, state as a political entity is stronger than ever, right? And it's due to a lot of different factors, but it means also we are through a time where, again, we see absolutely a firm assertiveness in terms of state sovereignty. It's true in Europe, by the way, very true. It's also true, of course, in the world, in Asia, in Africa, very strong. So that's the first factors, and of course, that has an impact on access. No international convergence, no pressure to make access obligatory, and of course, at the same time, states who are willing to control humanitarian aid in their context, in their country. By the way, they have a responsibility under the Geneva Convention to, in fact, protect and assist the people, but they go one step further. And it's not new. Remember of Kenya, for example, I was impressed at the time in 2007 when there was elections violence, or violence after the election, that I think what the key people from both sides agree from the onset was they didn't want to have an international interventions, and they wanted to control the humanitarian aid in Kenya. And you can say yes or no. Sri Lanka, Syria, Gaza, there's a lot of different elements, which is interesting if you look at over the last few years. So that's a very important factor. The second one is security. I will not go too long on security, but I think let's agree on two things in security. What has changed is two things. One, of course, is the fact that humanitarian, we are closer to conflict than we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were in some places, but not everywhere. It was absolutely not foreseen that humanitarian would be within the conflict. We always forget that. We found normal that we are. My organization, the ICRC, was not always within the conflict. It was, of course, dealing with conflict, but not within. MSF was maybe more, at the time, close to conflict, right? But it's true, today there is more humanitarian dealing within conflict. In a sense, more. We have more organization doing that. So I think there is a presence, there is an element of contact between humanitarian and, I would say, we can talk about governments, but also non-state armed group, which makes things objectively more complex. B, and I think this is maybe the big trend talking about security, is of course you have today, and that's what has changed over the last few years. Today you have government, but also a non-state armed group who have as a strategy, not as a tactical, as a strategy are aiming at humanitarian actor. As they do, by the way, as they also aim at journalists or at health professionals. They know exactly what they're doing. They know the pressure they are putting on a system, on people. So they know that. And that's maybe the worry. That's the new trend. It's really systematic from day one. And not just in conflict. When you have a situation like in Bahrain, for example, you can see clearly that you have a pressure which is done from day one on certain type of health worker, for example, doctors, whatever, in order to really put pressure. We've seen that also in a lot of context. And of course, it has an impact on us. But that's security, and we can discuss a lot about that and how it was. The other element of security, I think we need to challenge ourselves also. Over the last 10 years, we continue to pay the price of some of the choice we did. We continue to pay the price of the choice done by a lot of humanitarian actors in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, there was a choice made by humanitarian actors to clearly support the government in terms of its effort to stabilize the country. In Somalia, there was a choice made like that. Don't expect, when you do that choice, not to pay the price one day or another. You are perceived, rightly or wrongly, we are perceived sometimes on one side of the conflict, being the organization, with S, supporting in a way one side and not the other. And I think it is a price which is difficult to pay and very complex. Even we as an organization, ICRC, we try to be really radically neutral and impartial. We constantly get feedback in Afghanistan, for example, constantly get feedback about our agenda, are we serious, what are our tie with the UN, for example, how does that work, who finances us, why do we have to answer the questions from donors, that level, I mean, just constantly. all the question related to counter-terrorism, for example, all that dynamic around that has a massive impact on the way we are perceived. No surprise. So that has an impact on access. So that's my second point, is security. We will deal with it, but just. My third point is, and I'm careful what I'm saying, is the evolution of the model. I can always talk the business model of the humanitarian, not all of us, but some of the big international humanitarian, INGO, but also UN. Over the last 10 years, again, if you look into that, and again, I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but let's be very clear. The fact that a lot of key humanitarians have decided to outsource their response to partner, clearly outsource also risk and access to partner, and not with partner, but through partner, has a massive influence on the fact, on our ability to connect, to make ourselves understood, to engage the different elements. And yes, the reality is, in Syria, let's take the example. I can tell you very concretely, in Syria, today in the field, right, concretely in terms of international humanitarian organization, you don't have that many. In fact, you have one organization called the Syrian Arab Red Crescent who represent 90% of the help coming in the country from international sources. And then you have ICRC, painfully trying to do its best, including in rebel area. We just had hostage taking, and I still have to deal with hostage right now in rebel area, which is very difficult. But it's little compared to the needs, but the rest is very much local or businessman related. And if you would then take a step and look at what are we saying in the world about what we do or don't do in Syria, there is such a gap between what is said and spent and the reality, that is a massive problem for all of us. And I think we need to grasp that. So the third element in terms of access, there is a change in the way humanitarian action is done. Maybe not by MSF, not by ICRC, maybe not by the Red Cross, but we have to grasp that we are part of something larger, which is called the humanitarian, you can call it industry, sector, cluster, system, a landscape, but it is an issue, and we need to grasp that. So that's when we talk about access and some of the change. Now, what does that mean? And this is where I would like to zoom in. I would like to zoom in on two issues. But what I've told you right now is nothing really new, I don't think so. But I really would like to zoom in two elements. One is, what I think is of concern is direct access towards people affected. What I mean by direct access, it means access by people of the organization, and not just through partner. I'm of the strong opinion that we need to absolutely be very careful about ability to assist directly, to access directly people affected, to be with them closely connected. Why is it so important? If we don't do that, and you know that very well, the first thing will happen to us is we are losing relevance. And I think this is the most dangerous element. Having access to people, this is okay, but it's not just for the sake of it. Having access for us as an organization, I can talk about my organization, if we don't, we very quickly lose relevance. We lose the ability to understand the evolution of the needs, of the coping mechanism, of what is really at the core of the problems. And we've seen how much even my organization, 150 years old, we still sometimes don't grasp what the people are telling us. What are their problems? What is important for them? And we need to be very close to them. I'm convinced, really understand that. And having our own people doesn't mean we cannot also connect with other sources, but having our own people influence also the DNA of the organization. That's critical. You don't react the same if you have partner telling you what the people need versus your own people. And that's critical. So being able to understand what is needed to change maybe your response, to challenge back your own response is critical, absolutely critical. The second element, which is for me an important one, is we need to be able, as an organization, to engage people who control the fate of the people affected. And they are everywhere. We as an organization over the last 5 years, and it's painful for us, we have to learn how to engage with criminal groups called terrorist, criminal. We have to understand how they work, what does that mean, and the only way to engage this group is by being close to where it's happening, close to the people affected. We cannot do that in Geneva or in Berlin or via Skype. That doesn't work. We have to. We have to be on their territory. We have to negotiate with them access to ambulances, to health services, discuss also conduct of hostilities. And sometimes it's extremely difficult to do that. But it's only this type of discussion which allow us to really understand also what are the agenda of this group. And they are never, ever the same than the one you read in report. They are different. It's about people, it's about power. You have to be close to that. You have to understand that. If you don't, you're out of the game. And that's the risk. It's a very complex game right now, because it's a time of fragmentation too. It's not because you talk to one boss of the Taliban, as you know very well, that all the Taliban will abide by what the boss has said. You have to be able to connect with all of them to understand how it works. And it's a very difficult and sometimes very dangerous. But that's the way if we want to be able to do that. So being able to engage, and that's our responsibility too. We have a responsibility under the Geneva Convention on International Mental Law to also be able to engage and discuss. It goes the same, by the way, with the government. More and more complex. No way, including in this country, in Germany, to speak only to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today, what is important to discuss is, of course, with the Minister of Defense, with the Chancellor, with the Secret Service, because that's where it plays also. We have government with a complexity of engagement. In this country over the next 10 years will be more engaged internationally, not less. So it's important also that we grasp it, which is essential. So direct access, being there, engaging directly is, of course, for us of a critical nature. The last element, if we talk about direct access, and you just mentioned it before at the beginning about the principle. I think we are in a world, and you know that also, that we cannot just claim that we are principled, we are neutral, impartial, independent. I think this time is over. First of all, because everybody says the same. Everybody in this room and outside of the room. I didn't meet anybody these days which is not neutral, which worries me a lot, by the way, and not impartial, independent. Even MSF, so be careful. And I think we have, and here, you, together, I mean, we have to regain a little bit what it means. We have maybe to give a different profile. Humanity, impartiality, yes. That's maybe what unites all of us. I'm not sure about neutrality, I'm not sure about independence, but yes, possibly impartiality and humanity very strongly. And B, people are not impressed by what we say. People are impressed by what we demonstrate. They judge us. Again, people affected are judging us. I'm amazed, I don't know how it is for you, how much in Somalia or in Yemen recently, for example, or Iraq, people are cross-checking what we do or don't do to their family, to the other, what we've said or not. So it's about prove it. We are confronted, and some of us here in this room know that we are confronted with the need to prove it. We are in a world where people are not impressed if you are the Red Cross or if you are a Médecins du Monde. That doesn't impress anymore. So we're in a world where you have to prove that you are able to do it. And it's a tough one, it's a tough call. Direct access, again, allow you, even if it's difficult to do that. So at stake, not access, direct access. My last comment in terms of the other element, which I think is really at stake, which is a real concern for us. If we find it more difficult to access directly people in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Congo, I think the problem I see also is there will be a shift. As we have a shift in the notion of access, there will be a shift and we will start to lose what I would call the protection part of our work. What I mean by here, today people talk about food, water, and they mix sometimes and forget that there is a very strong element which is about how do we try to protect people. Direct access, again, allow you to really do individual work, to do the follow-up, to be in the community, to really fight hard for the protection part of it. And what worries me, and let's zoom in for a minute in Syria. Syria, including MSF, by the way, you have a tendency to say black and white, no access in rebel area, nobody works in rebel area. This is wrong, guys, completely wrong. Don't say that. Be smarter. Tell us, make another story. Today in Syria, there is some humanitarian service which goes everywhere. Water, for example, goes almost everywhere. Whereas, and that's a big deal, whereas medical, for example, or detention Imagine what it means today to be a prisoner in Syria. Imagine what it means in terms of vulnerability. Zero access. Zero. Zero access. Today, health facilities, real seriously, being able to do work, zero access, almost zero access. We as a humanitarian, to be able to capture that, not to be a very basic speech, which doesn't work. It works maybe outside, but at least ourselves, when we talk about it, when we engage, we need to be more serious, to put the pressure. Otherwise, let's be very honest, it would be so easy for the Syrian government and some of their supporters to play with it, no problem. So we have to be smarter in the way we talk about it. And we have to challenge ourselves differently and to look in what are we talking when we talk about access much more seriously. So that's my expectation towards the Congress, a real discussion. I think the question of access is critical. It is central to all of us. I think we have the responsibility to link it with what is happening and what will happen. I'm of the opinion the next 5 years will be extraordinarily critical. It's true for access, but not for everybody. You will see local NGOs being and having today access. You will see government service sometimes reaching people, and that's good news. But what we need to make sure is that's what is really accessing. We need to check the quality of the services. We need to check why, what are we talking about? And we need to make sure that, especially for the protection purpose, we maintain let's say, complementary approach between a local and international staff. That's critical, because we might be really under pressure on that one. And that's what is important. And last but not least, direct access. In the age of new technology, which are fundamental, as we all know, and we see that in Somalia right now with the cash transfer and all that, which is great, we need also to remember that a human-to-human, a face-to-face, will be critical more than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that really interesting keynote address. I think it has raised a number of questions that the conference will no doubt delve into further. As Ronald has already mentioned, we don't have a lot of time to give the floor over to the audience, but Ronald and I will do our best to ask some probing questions. So I'll launch straight into it. You spoke about international convergence, security and outsourcing. But my question relates to the kind of more in-depth that you went into responsibility to protect. So how do you think the changing nature of war, for example, the use of drones, will impact direct access, especially with regard to humanitarians' responsibility to protect?
How many hours do you give me to? It's a very important. Okay, let's to summarize, our impression, or my impression, is the following one, and I think it's important that we grasp that. Possibly we are still, rightly so in a way, totally obsessed by Afghanistan. Now we are obsessed by Syria, let's put it that way, and rightly so. But if you would say, if you travel and discuss in Parliament, right, in a country like this one, you would say that all the military thinking in modern army around the world, especially Western world, have been able to integrate or willing to integrate, in fact, lessons from Afghanistan. The problem is Afghanistan, and a lot of lessons need to be still learned from Afghanistan, a lot of lessons, I think. But the problem is Afghanistan is possibly the last conflict over the next 10 years or 20 years which will see such an intervention from the international forces. So most likely what we will see is much more the Pakistan and Yemen style and Somalia style conflict. And I agree with what you said, which is in a way an issue where you will see much more targeted intervention below the radar. So officially not at war. You will see some under, how can I say, let's say, yeah, under the radar forces, Secret Service, very specific, targeted, drone use. And here the issue for us, ICRC, but other, is, of course, we will be in a situation where on the battlefield, you'll have one side, but the other side won't be around, only coming from time to time, which will have two impacts, very clear. One, nothing to do with humanitarian, and one with humanitarian. First one is, of course, if you on the battlefield have only one side coming from time to time, the other side one day will go to find on the other playground where the other battlefield is, of course. And it's not a surprise if you see good example in Western Africa, what is happening, on Eastern Africa, what is happening now with Somalia is something interesting where you will see, of course, more intervention from the Shabab and other in Kenya and other places. So you will have that. For humanitarian, that's the second issue. It will be a big issue for us because we will be perceived as best as the people who come after the drone attack to see if things worked well, you know. People will ask us, why are you taking information? What does that mean? Why are you assessing what? The needs or the efficiency of the drone, right? So the pressure on us when you have nobody else but humanitarian, I think will be very problematic. Last but not least, at least for the ICRC, I perceive really a massive issue also being able to collect and to really do the démarche on both sides with a country which will claim that they didn't attack, they were not part of it. So it would be a very complicated issue in terms of accountability, in terms of ability to really address the questions, and in terms of trust. And we all know that, and we all love, I don't do publicity, our iPhone or Samsung, I don't know who has Samsung, I hope nobody, but okay, iPhone. We love it, but you know how much it's changing already the relationship we have in the field. And tomorrow, with all the positive, but also all the problems. I mean, today, my teams in Somalia, in Yemen also right now, less so in Afghanistan, but still, are constantly, but even Sudan also constantly giving me feedback that it's difficult these days to be trusted by any warlord or any armed group who think that, you know, our people are controlled by satellite. They are worried that the drone will follow them and just hit them. They are nervous that we will, not us, but through intelligence record information, that it will go through the International Penal Court. So all that linked has a massive impact on trust. And that would have been my thing. So my worry, to summarize, is trust will be more a problem. And we need to manage trust. We as an organization, ICRC, and at you too also, we need to manage trust. Even, I'm not talking about love, I'm not talking about likelihood, but I'm talking about really trust, that people, at least even people, difficult people, they need to be able to think that when we come, we are serious and we are ready to talk about humanitarian. And that we don't come with already information, gathering, and or whatever. All what you've read recently about, including in this country, having, for example, the iPhone, I don't know if she has an iPhone, BlackBerry of the Chancellor being obviously checked by other country, is something which is also read somewhere else. And of course, it means very clearly, if you will be today an armed group, non-state armed group, or a country, you are also worried about, in fact, humanitarian who comes with all their technology. Even if they are nice, maybe they bring with them some people. And I fear that in this distance drone, new technology element, there's a lot of positive, but there's a lot of worry, and it will specifically put under pressure trust. And that's absolutely, if I see one concern, that will be my main concern.
We have one more question, and this one will be the last. And well, based on the fact that there are many students in the audience, I think, or we think, it's a must to ask the following. What would you advise someone starting in this profession? We hope you can answer that.
Good, exactly. Now, what I would tell you, if you're aiming to do that, I would tell you first, great idea. No, really. It's a much challenging time for you than it was for me at my time, because humanitarian affairs and humanitarian organizations have professionalized themselves. So for you to arrive in the organization is tougher. I have no doubt not one, but it's worthwhile. It's really worthwhile. If I may, link it with yourself also. Do it as a personal project. I think it's important. Clarify of what you want. There is a lot out there interesting. Go, pitch, push for it. It's worthwhile. We need you. That's the message also. Even if we have a lot of professionals, we need also your perspective. I think what you bring in is something certainly interesting and different. And why is it useful to go? Because the next 10 years, you will see humanitarian world changing dramatically. Not a surprise. We've seen a lot of other sectors in our societies changing dramatically. Not so much humanitarian world, surprisingly enough, but it will change massively. So it's a great journey. But then be ready. It will be tough. Thank you.
I'm sorry. You have to stay there. We've been given one more. We're doing so well that we've been given one more question by the organisers. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for giving Noah the opportunity to participate in the panel. It's really appreciated. So linking on to what you've just said, and also to your keynote address, do you think that the media can help or hinder in crises, especially with regard to social media? Do you think it can play a democratic role?
Did you say democratic?
Can it play a role?
I would, sorry, I would be slightly not politically correct. I think you, if I may, you link democratic with humanitarian, and I'll be very careful, if I may. I think it doesn't mean that you should not have an aim to really use social media for democratic purpose, absolutely. But I would be very careful not to link it immediately with humanitarian aid or humanitarian in general, right? I don't think there is an automatic link. And my problem is there is too many people doing the automatic link, and it has caused a lot of problem, right? And that's really a worry I have, if I may say. On humanitarian aid and human assistance and humanitarian protection, yes, I think social media already today play a fantastic role. And we, as a humanitarian organization, it's very true for MSF, even more than from the ICRC, we have to look at the way we are testifying. I would say 20 years or 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, MSF would still say, if I may challenge you a little bit on that one, would still say, we would go somewhere and we come and we testify what's happening in Syria. I'm a humanitarian, I will tell you how serious it is. Yeah, but if you look at what Syrians are telling you, Syrians didn't wait us to be in Syria to tell the people what's happening. I mean, today, if you would look on social media, I mean, there's enormous information about what's going on every day in Syria. If you want information, you can have it. So what is interesting is we need to grasp that. I think we need to embrace it, but also, and this is very true also for media, we as humanitarians need then to change a bit the perspective. I don't think we are anymore here just to testify. I don't think so. I think we are here much more now to maybe frame it in a way and maybe give a different perspective. Say, yes, this is important versus this one. So it's also being able to look into that, and maybe we have also to be able to judge, and that's difficult, to cross-check the information we're receiving. I've never received so different information right now and being also so much manipulated than right now. And that's difficult. I hope you understand if you go on Facebook or YouTube, I hope you have seen that it's not just citizens which now are taking care of the social media, right? It's government, it's armed group, right? So we need to capture that, but we don't have to have this naive perception that social media by essence is people nicely just going like that. So I think there is I would say, for us at least humanitarian, a responsibility to deal with it, to play with it, to use it, but also to check it. And I think this is maybe the big challenge for us, is receiving information, being able, again, to cross-check with what's happening in the field. And this is maybe where we have a responsibility. But it will go on. It will change the way we connect. It possibly will change also our own position towards people affected. Tomorrow, and I'll finish with that, I'm of the opinion, you all know TripAdvisor, isn't it? Yes, okay. If we would be in a congress in Berlin, a few years ago, imagine we would be a congress of hotel industry, right? 5 years ago, I would speak as the head of the international hotel industry, and I will tell you, let's make sure we control Lonely Planet. They are painful, right? Let's make sure that Lonely Planet really gives us the notes we need as we hotel. That's very important to do that. And some of you would say, no, not only Lonely Planets, be careful, Le Guide du Routard, and others say, okay, well, we'll have to work around. Today, if you look as an hotel, I think 90% of the behavior of customer is managed, pushed by TripAdvisor. At least 90%. They didn't see it happening 5 years ago, at all. Maybe TripAdvisor, not same, but I don't know how it will be called, Humanitarian Advisor application will come out and we will be rated by people. It's not totally excluded, really. Think about it. And how much it will influence our perceptions, our discussions, how much it will be, because so far, what is interesting, we have a tendency to have inner circle discussion, which is good, but tomorrow, maybe the people invited at the table will be the people affected. We talked about it for a long time, about accountability towards beneficiaries, but it's a bit far away. We decided that we want to manage accountability towards beneficiaries. Tomorrow, with social media, maybe people will invite themselves to the table and they will be central to the Congress in Berlin. Thank you.